Welcome to Roadmap to Residency Evidence-Based Applications. Hello everyone, I am Abhiraz. Welcome to our Club to 50 Matchmaker sessions. Here in this video, we will be talking in brief the theory part of the control of respiration. The understanding is important and you will be able to answer the most of the questions that may come from this topic. So the nervous system adjusts the rate of alveolar ventilation almost exactly to the demands of the body so that the partial pressure of oxygen and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood are hardly altered, even during heavy exercise and most other type of respiratory stress. So the regulation of respiration is generally controlled by a voluntary regulation, which is through cerebral cortex, and involuntary regulation, which is through neural regulation and chemical regulation. So the central controller, that is the pons, medulla, and other parts of the brain, they send an output signal to the effectors, that are the respiratory muscles. And again, there are some of the chemoreceptors which are present in the lung and some other receptors which act as a sensor. And these sensors then again send input or a signal towards the central controller and stimulate the central controller. If effectors are equally effective, if effectors are normal, then it may inhibit the sensors sometime. So the respiratory center composed of several groups of neurons located bilaterally in the medulla and the pons, that is the brainstem. The dorsal respiratory group is mainly for inspiration and the ventral respiratory group is for inspiration and expiration. The pneumotaxic center causes transition of inspiration to expiration, controls the rate and depth of breathing, and the apneustic center causes prolonged inspiration. So here we have the pneumotaxic center, which inhibits the apneustic center. So there is a ventral respiratory group, which controls the expiration and inspiration. And these are the respiratory motor pathways, which supplies the respiratory muscles. And again, this is the dorsal respiratory group for inspiration. Okay. And this is the ventral respiratory group, which can control both the expiration and inspiration. So the dorsal respiratory group plays fundamental role in the control of respiration. It is located in the dorsal portions of the medulla, and most of its neurons located in the nucleus of tractus solitarius. So nucleus of tractus solitarius is the sensory termination of both the vagal and glossopharyngeal nerves that transmits sensory signals into the respiratory system. So here is the respiratory cycle. So whenever there is the dorsal respiratory group inspiratory ramp signals, it stimulates the sensory neurons, which is mainly to the diaphragm, which supplies mainly to the diaphragm. And then there is the contraction of inspiratory muscles and inspiration occur. And again, whenever there is a switch off ramp signal, there is the elastic recoil of lungs and chest wall and expiration takes place. And this elastic recoil again stimulates the dorsal respiratory group of inspiratory ramp signals. And again, the cycle is continued. Now, this is the respiratory cycle. Now, the ventral respiratory group, located on each side of the medulla, is 5 mm anterior and lateral to the dorsal respiratory group, consists of four main nuclei. Borzinger complex, which controls the expiration, pre-Borzinger complex, which sets the pace of respiration, the nucleus ambiguous, which supplies the inspiratory neurons, and nucleus retroambiguous, which supplies both the inspiratory and expiratory neurons. So the functions of ventral respiratory group, it remains inactive during normal quiet inspiration, consists of both inspiratory and expiratory neurons, active during forceful respiration. For example, during exercise, there is electrical stimulation of few neurons of ventral respiratory group, which causes inspiration, and few neurons which may cause expiration. So VRG contributes for both inspiration and expiration. So the apneustic center is located in the lower pons and it stimulates the dorsal respiratory group and it increases the inspiration. So the dorsal respiratory group, since its function is for inspiration and since it is stimulated by the apneustic center, it increases the inspiration. Whereas the ventral respiratory group, it increases the both expiration and inspiration. And it gets feedback from the vagi and other centers. So vagus nerve and other centers. So the pneumotaxic center is located in the upper pons or the parabrachial nucleus, transmits the signals to the inspiratory area, controls the switch of point of inspiratory ramp, that is the transition of inspiration to expiration. It controls the filling phase of lung cycle, and a strong pneumotaxic center signals decreases the duration of inspiration to 0.5 second. The weak pneumotaxic center signals the increased duration of inspiration. That is more time for the filling of lungs. Now, here is the neural regulation of respiration. So you can see there is the brain, there is the breathing control center, which is the pons and the medulla center. And these there are the nerve impulses which trigger the contraction of inspiratory muscles, okay, like the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, okay. Now these are supplied by the phrenic nerve. The diaphragm is supplied by the phrenic nerve, and the intercostal muscles are supplied by the intercostal nerves. And whenever there is stimulation of these nerves, then there is initiation of inspiration, okay. And also there is oxygen sensor in the aortic body of aortic arch. Whenever there is decrease in the oxygen tension, or there is decrease in the oxygen saturation or oxygen percentage, it stimulates the breathing control centers, and there is increase in the inspiration. Or also the breathing control center is stimulated by the carbon dioxide increase in the blood, which acts directly on the medulla centers by causing a drop in the pH of the cerebrospinal fluid. And again, this stimulates the breathing control centers. Also, the NOR impulse from the oxygen sensor indicates the oxygen decrease. Whenever there is decreased oxygen, it stimulates the breathing control centers, as I have talked with you before. So this is the basic neural regulation of respiration. So now whenever we talk about other carbon dioxide, oxygen, DS, or how there is the chemical regulation of respiration. So in case of emotions and voluntary control, there is stimulation of higher brain centers, which ultimately stimulates the limbic system. Also in case of carbon dioxide, it also stimulates the medullary chemoreceptors. In case of oxygen and pH alteration, it stimulates the carotid and aortic chemoreceptors, which is there present in the aortic arch, and it stimulates the afferent sensory neurons. And again, there is stimulation of pons and medulla, the dorsal and ventral respiratory group, where there is stimulation of inspiratory and expiratory somatic motor neurons, which go to stimulate or act on different muscles of inspiration and expiration. So what do you mean by hypoxic drive? So normally the most important stimulus affecting the breathing rate and depth is blood PCO2. So hypoxic drive is when the PO2 levels becomes the stimulation for breathing. So it occurs in some respiratory disorders such as emphysema with decreased ability to exhale the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide levels in the blood remain elevated for a long period. The chemoreceptors become less sensitive to PCO2. By default, the decrease in the PO2 stimulates them. The administering oxygen can elevate the PO2 and interfere with the person's ability to breathe on his own. Talking about hypercapnia, so dyspnea to respiratory depression. If there is too high CO2 in the blood, then it will lead to hypercapnia. There can be symptoms like headache, which is due to the vasodilation, papillary edema, tachycardia, and increase in the blood pressure, drowsiness and coma, and respiratory acidosis. Administering oxygen may eliminate the drive to breathe, especially in case of COPD patient. So whenever there is alveolar ventilation, hypoventilation in case of respiratory failure, the cerebral blood vessels are the most sensitive to CO2 and PCO2. There is adaptive value of increasing blood pressure, so it brings more blood to the brain. It brings more CO2 to the lungs and attempt to excrete more. The CO2 narcosis is when CO2 is above 80 to 90 millimeter of mercury, and whenever it is at this level, it will decrease the ventilation by half. Thank you for watching. Keep studying hard.